"Your daughter is beautiful," a stranger said in the grocery store. "I don't have a daughter," I replied. Then a little girl I'd never seen grabbed my hand and called me mommy. A stranger tapped my shoulder in the produce aisle, right between the avocados and the bagged lemons, and said the sentence that ended one version of my life and started another. "Your daughter is beautiful." "I don't have a daughter," I told her, already half smiling, already reaching for the polite confusion you use on strangers who've mixed you up with someone else. Her face dropped. Not embarrassed, dropped. Alarmed, dropped. "She's been following you since the park," she said. I assumed you knew." I turned around. A little girl I had never seen before was standing 3 feet behind me, holding a stuffed elephant against her chest with both arms, watching me with an expression I recognized before I understood why I recognized it. She stepped forward and grabbed my hand like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "Can we go home now, Mommy? I'm Whitney Wood. I'm 34. I'm a forensic accountant. I spend my professional life tracing numbers that people have tried very hard to erase, following a paper trail back to the exact moment someone decided to lie. I have built a career out of not being fooled by things that look clean on the surface." And staring down at this 5-year-old's face in the fluorescent light of a Kroger produce aisle, I recognized my dead sister. I need to back up because none of what happened in that aisle makes sense without understanding what my family had already trained me to accept as normal. My sister Vanessa went silent 4 years ago. Not dramatically, and there was no fight anyone could point to. No slammed door at Thanksgiving that everyone still talks about. She just stopped showing up, stopped answering. My mother, Lorraine, had a tidy explanation ready every time I asked. "Vanessa doesn't want to be found, Whitney. Some people just need to run from family. It's a shame, but it's her choice." I believed it mostly because Lorraine has always been the kind of mother whose explanations arrive so fully formed and so calmly delivered that questioning them feels almost rude. I'd tried calling Vanessa's old number twice a year, on her birthday and at Christmas, and it had always gone straight to a voicemail box that was full. I told myself that was just Vanessa being Vanessa. She'd always been the wilder one, the one who left home at 19 and never came back for more than a weekend, the one my mother described at dinner parties with a small, practiced sigh, like Vanessa was a weather pattern instead of a daughter. I loved her, I missed her, and somewhere along the way, without ever deciding to, I'd let my mother's version of the story become mine too. That's the first red flag I want you to notice, because I didn't notice it myself for 4 years. I never once asked my mother why Vanessa didn't want to be found. I just accepted that she didn't. The woman in the produce aisle, I'd learn her name was Pam, that she was Lily's emergency foster caregiver, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s with a county badge clipped to her cardigan. Explained it fast, the way people explain things when they're already bracing for you not to believe them. Lily had slipped away from her at the park 2 blocks over. "She does this," Pam said, crouching slightly, keeping one eye on the girl now gripping my hand like a life raft. "Finds someone and won't let go. She lost her mom a couple months back. I think she's still looking for her, in her way." I looked down at Lily. She had Vanessa's exact chin, Vanessa's exact stubborn eyebrows, the ones our mother used to call the wood scowl, like it was a birthright. Lily held out the stuffed elephant so I'd take it while she drank the juice box Pam had produced from her bag. I turned the elephant over out of pure reflex, the kind of instinct 12 years of forensic work builds into you, the need to check the seams of anything before you trust what's printed on the front. Sewn into the inside seam, in small block letters on a fabric name tag, someone had written Lily Wood, my last name. My stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with the produce section's air conditioning. I told myself it was a coincidence. Wood isn't a rare name. I stood there in the aisle running the math anyway, the way I run math on every file that crosses my desk. And the math wasn't cooperating with the coincidence theory. I almost put the elephant back in her arms and let the whole thing go. Told myself I had groceries melting in the cart, a client deliverable due Friday, a life that didn't have room in it for chasing down a stranger's resemblance to a woman I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. That's the version of that afternoon where I go home, unpack the groceries, and never find out what my mother did. I think about that version sometimes, the one where I let it go, and it makes my hands go cold even now, a year later, thinking about how close I came to just walking to my car. I didn't walk to my car. I asked Pam for a contact number on file for next of kin, flashing my ID and explaining, half true, that I might know the family. She gave it to me without much hesitation. County caseworkers, I'd learn, are used to the general public not caring enough to ask, and grateful when someone does. I called the number from the parking lot before I'd even loaded my groceries into the Honda Accord. Disconnected. I ran a reverse lookup instead. The same database I use at work to trace a wire transfer back to its origin account, and the number traced to a Vanessa M. Wood, last known address 40 minutes outside the city. My hands weren't steady on the steering wheel by then. I told myself it still might be nothing, might be an old number Vanessa had once had, passed down, resold, reused the way disconnected numbers get recycled all the time. I searched her name anyway, sitting in my car with the AC running and my groceries sweating in the trunk. A funeral home listing came up second in the results, beneath an old LinkedIn profile I hadn't known existed. Vanessa Marie Wood, beloved daughter and sister, passed peacefully after a battle with pancreatic cancer, dead 10 weeks. The obituary, 3 sparse paragraphs, clearly written by someone who either didn't know her well or didn't want to say much, ended with a line that made my whole body go cold in the front seat of my car. She is survived by her mother, Lorraine Wood, and her siblings, Whitney and Dean, no children, no children. I sat there for 11 minutes without moving, according to the parking lot camera timestamp I'd later pull for my attorney. 11 minutes, staring at an obituary that had erased a little girl I'd just held hands with 20 minutes earlier. I ordered the DNA test the next morning through a lab I trusted from prior work, Meridian Forensic Genomics, the same lab I'd used to authenticate financial documents tied to a paternity dispute in an estate case 2 years before. I told myself I was being thorough, professional, careful not to build a house on a foundation I hadn't tested. I told myself a lot of things that week that were really just ways of not saying, I think my mother let a child disappear from our family and called it a coincidence. 4 days later, the results came back. Aunt and niece, 99% probability. Those 4 days were some of the longest of my life. I went to work each morning and sat through client calls about depreciation schedules and audit trails, nodding at the right moments, while some other part of my brain sat in a parking lot outside a Kroger, replaying a 5-year-old's grip on my hand. I didn't tell anyone at work what was happening. I didn't tell anyone at all, actually, except Renata, whom I hadn't officially hired yet. I'd just called her as a friend, the way you call a lawyer friend when you don't yet know if you need a lawyer or just someone to tell you you're not losing your mind. My hands shook reading the report, actually shook, the paper trembling enough that I had to set it flat on the kitchen counter to finish reading it. I'd read 1,000 lab reports in my career without my hands doing that. This one undid 12 years of professional composure in about 4 seconds. I called the caseworker listed on Lily's case file, Deborah Ashford, a family services caseworker with 19 years in the county system, the kind of steady, overworked competence you only get from someone who's seen every version of a broken family come through her office. I explained who I was. I explained the DNA results. I asked carefully how a child with a living biological aunt had ended up in emergency foster placement with a stranger tracking her down in a grocery store. What Deborah told me next stopped my breath in my chest. We already notified next of kin 7 weeks ago, she said, flipping through what I imagined was a case file thick with more paperwork than I could yet understand. Your mother, Lorraine Wood. She confirmed the biological relationship and declined placement on behalf of the family. 7 weeks. My mother had known about this child, my sister's daughter, my niece, a 5-year-old with the Wood scowl wandering a public park in the care of a rotating foster system for 7 weeks, and she had said nothing. Not at Sunday brunch, 3 separate Sundays running, where she'd talked instead about her garden and Dean's promotion and whether I was ever going to settle down. Not once. I hung up the phone and sat on my kitchen floor because my legs had stopped being reliable, and I let myself feel exactly 1 full minute of something that wasn't rage yet, something closer to grief for the 4 years I'd spent believing my sister simply didn't want to be found. Then the rage came, and it stayed. I tried to fix it quietly first, the way you do before you understand you're dealing with something that quiet won't fix. I called my mother directly. I didn't accuse her of anything. I gave her every chance, that first call, to tell me herself, to explain, to say I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. Instead, Lorraine's voice on the phone was as smooth and unbothered as it had been every Sunday for the past 7 weeks. Whitney, honey, I don't know what you think you found, but Vanessa didn't have children. You know how she was. Prone to exaggeration, prone to disappearing into whatever story made her feel important. I have a DNA test, Mom, I said. 99%. She's Vanessa's daughter. There was a pause on the line. Not a guilty pause, I realized later, replaying it. A calculating one. Some things, my mother finally said, are better left where they landed. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back over the phone. I wanted to say it to her face with a witness in the room, because I'd learned by then, from Deborah, from Pam, from the caseworker's careful, documented tone, that my mother had a habit of making things disappear that only worked when nobody else was listening. A week later, a small cardboard box arrived at my apartment. Vanessa's things, forwarded from the county after the estate inventory, addressed in Deborah's careful handwriting. Most of it was ordinary. A jewelry box, a stack of photographs I hadn't seen in years, a paperback with a cracked spine. At the bottom, wrapped in a scarf I recognized from Vanessa's 20s, was a sealed envelope. 1 word on the front, in Vanessa's handwriting. A handwriting I would have known anywhere even after 4 years of silence. Birdie. Nobody else had ever called me that. It was Vanessa's name for me, from when we were kids, and I used to follow her around the backyard, cataloging every bird that landed on the fence, writing their species in a little spiral notebook while she rolled her eyes and called me Birdie for the rest of both our lives. My mother didn't know the nickname. Dean didn't know it. It belonged only to us. My hands were shaking again by the time I got the envelope open. Vanessa's letter told the truth our family had spent 4 years burying. She'd gotten pregnant at 31, unmarried, the father out of the picture before she'd even finished the first trimester. She'd told our mother first, the way you tell your mother things when you still believe, at 31, that mothers are supposed to help. Lorraine had given her an ultimatum instead. Give up the baby, quietly. Through a private arrangement Lorraine had already half arranged with a lawyer friend, or lose the family entirely. No middle option, no support, just a closed door dressed up as a choice. Vanessa chose Lily. Our mother told everyone else she'd had a miscarriage. She told Vanessa in the same breath that I had agreed the baby was a disgrace, that I didn't want anything to do with either of them. And she told me for 4 straight years that Vanessa simply didn't want to be found. 2 lies, built on either side of the same wall, engineered so neither of us would ever climb over it to compare notes. I read that part of the letter 3 times before I could keep going. My chest hurt in a way I didn't didn't have a clinical word for. The letter ended, "I signed papers, Bertie. Find them. I named you. I always trusted you. Even when I let Mom convince me you'd stopped trusting me." I called my attorney, Renata Ibarra, the next morning, a family law specialist I'd worked alongside during 2 prior estate disputes, someone I trusted to move fast and move carefully at the same time. I read her the letter over the phone. I could hear her go quiet on the other end, the particular quiet of a lawyer recalculating a case in real time. "Whitney," she said, "I need you to come in today. If Vanessa filed anything formal naming you, we need to find it before anyone else does something with that girl's benefits." I didn't understand what she meant by that last part yet. I would within the week, and it would make everything that came before it look almost gentle by comparison. I went back to see Pam a few days after the produce aisle, before any of the legal machinery had started turning, because I needed to understand what the last 2 months of Lily's life had actually looked like. Pam had been doing emergency foster placement for 11 years, the kind of work that doesn't pay well and doesn't get talked about at dinner parties, and she talked to me in her kitchen with the particular bluntness of someone who's stopped softening things for people who need to hear them straight. "She's been in 3 placements since her mom passed," Pam told me, stirring a coffee she didn't seem to actually want. "Not because anything went wrong, because nobody with legal standing ever stepped up to keep her in one place. County does what it can, but a 5-year-old doesn't understand paperwork delays. She just understands that the people around her keep changing." I asked her about the park, why Lily had run, what she'd been looking for. Pam shrugged, the kind of shrug that carries more grief than words would. "She does this at every placement, eventually. Finds a woman who looks like she might belong to her, and just attaches." I used to think it was random. It's not. She's not looking for just anyone. She looked at me for a second too long. "I think she's looking for someone who looks like the mother she lost. You favor your sister more than you probably realize." I hadn't thought about it that way until she said it. I'd spent so much of the last week chasing the paperwork trail that I hadn't let myself sit with the simpler, harder truth underneath it. A little girl had been searching crowded public places for a face that reminded her of the one she'd lost, and mine happened to be close enough to stop her in her tracks. I didn't sleep well that night either. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. I called Dean before I ever confronted my mother directly, because some small, stubborn part of me still wanted to believe he didn't know either, that this was a Lorraine-shaped secret, contained, not something my brother had chosen to participate in. "Did you know," I asked him, "that Vanessa had a daughter?" There was a pause on the line just half a second too long to be genuine surprise. "Whitney, I don't think you should be getting involved in this," he said, which wasn't an answer. And I noticed that immediately, the way you notice a number that doesn't reconcile on a balance sheet. "Mom's handling it. It's complicated. There's estate stuff. There's a 5-year-old, Dean," I said. "That's what there is." He didn't have anything to say to that. I hung up feeling worse than before I'd called, because I'd wanted, badly, for at least one person in my family to be as blindsided as I was. Instead, I'd gotten a brother who already knew enough to sound guilty and not enough to sound honest. I tried my mother one more time after that, a second call, gentler than the first, in case gentleness was the thing that had been missing. I told her about Lily's smile, about the elephant, about the way she grabbed my hand like she already knew me. I thought, foolishly, that if I made Lily real enough, specific enough, a person instead of a scandal, my mother might soften. "You always did get attached to strays," Lorraine said, and hung up before I could answer. Then Renata found the papers within 3 days. A notarized standby guardian designation, filed 18 months before Vanessa's death, back when she must have already known, on some level, that time was shorter than she was telling anyone. The document named me as Lily's guardian in the event Vanessa couldn't care for her. It excluded my mother by name. It excluded my brother Dean and his wife Sloane by name too. Each exclusion accompanied by a short, chillingly specific written reason. Lorraine Wood is excluded due to prior coercive conduct regarding this child's existence. Dean and Sloane Wood are excluded due to financial instability and lack of any relationship with the child. Vanessa had seen every bit of this coming. She'd built a wall of paperwork around her daughter years before I even knew Lily existed. Then Renata found the second thing, and this was the one that made my stomach turn all the way over. A representative payee form, the document that redirects a minor's Social Security survivor benefits into an adult's account on the child's behalf, had been filed 4 weeks after Vanessa's death, filed by Sloane, co-signed by Dean, before any custody hearing had taken place, before either of them had any legal standing whatsoever to make decisions on Lily's behalf. The form redirected Lily's monthly survivor benefit straight into Dean and Sloane's joint checking account at Fifth Regional Bank. 2 deposits had already landed by the time Renata pulled the records, $1,840 total. Neither Dean nor Sloane had met Lily, not once. Deborah confirmed it flatly when I called her. In 19 years of casework, she said, she had never seen an aunt and uncle file paperwork for a child's benefits before ever attempting a single supervised visit. Renata walked me through exactly what the paperwork meant in practice. The Social Security Administration doesn't verify a physical custody arrangement before approving a representative payee. It relies largely on the applicant's own attestation, cross-checked against whatever documentation gets submitted. Sloane had submitted a photocopy of Lily's birth certificate, obtained, we'd later learn, from a copy Vanessa had once mailed to Lorraine years earlier, just just in case, and a signed statement claiming informal caregiving responsibility that Deborah's case file flatly contradicted. It wasn't a sophisticated fraud. It was a fast one, filed in the narrow, chaotic window between a death and a court date, betting that nobody would check the timeline closely enough to notice the gap. This is the part, Renata told me, tapping the payee form on her desk, that stops being a family dispute and starts being something a prosecutor might actually care about. I sat in Renata's office with the printouts spread across her desk, the representative payee form, the bank routing number, the guardian designation with my name on it in Vanessa's own handwritten initials beside the notary stamp, and I understood, for the first time in 4 years, exactly what my family actually was. My mother staged what she called a family discussion the following week. At her house, in the living room with the good furniture nobody was allowed to sit on growing up, Deborah came at my request as a neutral third party. A caseworker's presence, Renata had advised me, would keep the conversation honest, or at least keep it on the record. My mother sat in her usual chair like she was chairing a board meeting. Dean and Sloane sat together on the love seat, close enough that I could see Sloane's hand resting on Dean's knee, a small performative tell of solidarity. I sat across from all three of them with Renata's folder in my lap and Deborah's notepad open beside her. I think, my mother began, in the calm, reasonable voice she used for delivering verdicts, that we're all overreacting to something that should have stayed private. That child was never supposed to exist. Vanessa knew the arrangement. She broke it. And now we're all supposed to rearrange our lives because she couldn't follow through on a decision she agreed to. The room went silent in the specific way rooms go silent right before something breaks. Deborah's pen had stopped moving. I watched her write something anyway, fast, without looking down. I'd learn later it was a direct quote, time-stamped, because caseworkers document things exactly like that on instinct, the way Patrice back at the hospital used to, the way people who've seen families do this before know to. That's when I saw movement in the doorway behind my mother's chair. Lily was standing there, in a cardigan, 2 sizes too big for her, the stuffed elephant hanging from one hand. She'd been playing quietly in the hallway, supposedly out of earshot. She wasn't out of earshot. She'd heard every word. Nobody said anything for a long moment. My mother's face did something I'd never seen it do before. A flicker of something almost like shame, gone as fast as it arrived, replaced immediately by irritation that the moment had been witnessed. I crossed the room and picked Lily up before anyone else could decide what to do about her standing there. She put her head on my shoulder, the elephant crushed between us, and I felt something in my chest settle into place with a kind of finality I hadn't expected. My mother recovered fast, the way she always did, straightening in her chair and smoothing the front of her blazer like the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. "Whitney, you're being dramatic. Put her down. This is an adult conversation." "No," I said, and I felt how strange the words sounded coming out of my mouth in that living room, a room where I had never once said no to her as a child. "We're done here. Deborah, I'd like to file for temporary guardianship today, if I can." The guardianship hearing was set for 6 weeks out, 6 weeks that felt at the time like they might never end. I had 24-hour stretches during that window where I genuinely didn't know if I'd get to keep her. Dean and Sloane filed a competing petition 11 days before the hearing, and their attorney, a sharp, unbothered man named Curtis Feld, made it clear in his filings exactly what argument he intended to make: that I was single, that my job kept irregular hours, that I'd had no relationship with the child before a chance grocery store encounter. His filing used the phrase, "a filing cabinet, not a family," to describe me, a line I know was meant to needle me and did exactly that for 3 sleepless nights running. I remember standing in my kitchen at 2:47 a.m. the night before the hearing, rereading Vanessa's letter for what must have been the 40th time, my hands cold around a mug of tea I never drank. I had spent 12 years being the person who found the proof other people needed. I had never once had to be the proof myself. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, a judge named the Honorable Miriam Castellano, who had presided over family court for 14 years and had, according to Renata, a reputation for having very little patience for financial motives dressed up as family concern. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night for most of that week. My stomach had stopped tolerating coffee somewhere around day 3, and I remember standing in the courthouse hallway that morning with my hands pressed flat against my thighs, trying to still them before we walked in, running through everything Renata had prepped me to say, and none of it feeling like enough. Lily wasn't allowed in the courtroom for the arguments themselves. Deborah had arranged for her to wait with a child advocate 2 floors down, and some part of me was almost grateful for that, because I didn't know yet whether I'd be walking out of that room still allowed to pick her up afterward. Curtis Feld went first, laying out his case with the smooth confidence of a man who'd clearly won cases like this before. "Single," he said again, distant. "No established bond prior to a coincidental encounter in a supermarket." He suggested, without quite saying it outright, that my sudden interest in guardianship might have more to do with the emotional aftermath of grief than with the child's actual best interests. He used the word impulsive 3 times in under 10 minutes. I counted, because counting things is what I do with my hands, when the rest of me wants to fall apart. Then Renata stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She read Vanessa's letter aloud, into the record, every word of it, and I watched Judge Castellano's expression shift somewhere around the line. "Whitney is the only member of my family who never stopped being kind, even when she didn't know the full story." Then Renata laid out the representative payee form, the exact date it was filed, 4 weeks and 2 days after Vanessa's death. The routing number. The two deposits, $920 each, landed and spent before any custody hearing had even been scheduled. She laid out Deborah's sworn statement that in 19 years of casework, she'd never once seen Dean or Sloan attempt a supervised visit, request a photograph, or ask a single question about Lily's well-being before the benefits form arrived on her desk. My mother, sitting in the gallery in a blazer she'd clearly chosen for the occasion, shot to her feet. "This is what happens," she said, her voice climbing, cracking at the edges in a way I'd genuinely never heard from her before. "When you let people dig into things that should have stayed buried." Judge Castellano didn't even look up from the documents in front of her. "Ma'am, sit down or I'll have you removed from this courtroom." My mother sat down. I watched her hands folded tightly in her lap, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anything close to needing her approval. I stood last when Renata gestured for me too, and I felt the whole room's attention land on me the way it had landed on Lily in that doorway 6 weeks earlier, except this time I was ready for it. "I don't want a cent of my sister's estate," I said, and I felt the courtroom shift slightly, the way rooms do when they expect one thing and get another. "I want it placed in a protected trust for Lily, managed by an independent fiduciary, every dollar restricted to her education and her future. I don't want access to it. I don't want to manage it. I want it protected from anyone in this room who's already shown what they'll do with money that isn't theirs." I looked at the folder in my hands, though I didn't need it anymore. I knew what I wanted to say. "My sister raised her daughter alone for 5 years because our family called that child a disgrace," I said. "She hid a cancer diagnosis, she hid a pregnancy, and she hid an entire 5-year-old girl because the alternative was losing every single one of us. She left a letter that says she trusted me. She named me, not because I was the strongest person in this family, because I was the only one who never gave her a reason to think I'd say no." I looked at my mother. She didn't meet my eyes. I looked at Dean and Sloan. Dean at least had the decency to look at the floor. Sloan didn't. Sloan looked at me the way you look at a competitor who's beaten you on a bid, already recalculating, already moving on to whatever came next. "She has a family now," I said. "It's me." Judge Castellano granted temporary guardianship on the spot, effective immediately, with a full hearing for permanent guardianship scheduled 90 days out. She also referred the representative Hayi filing to the Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General for a full investigation, noting for the record that unauthorized redirection of a minor's survivor benefits prior to legal custody being established was a matter outside the scope of family court and squarely inside the scope of federal fraud statutes. Dean and Sloan were ordered to repay the $1,840 in full. I later learned from Deborah that the federal investigation expanded once investigators started pulling threads, a habit of Sloan's apparently, of filing payee paperwork for benefits she had no legal claim to, going back further than just Lily's case. I don't know the full outcome of that investigation. I know it wasn't a fine and an apology. Lily's been with me for a year now. She still sleeps with that stuffed elephant, the seams a little more worn, the name tag inside, Lily Wood, still legible if you know where to look. I framed a photograph of Vanessa at 22, laughing at something out of frame, and hung it in Lily's room where she can see it every morning, so that whatever else got taken from her, she'll always know exactly whose daughter she is. The permanent guardianship hearing, 90 days after the temporary ruling, went almost quietly by comparison. Curtis Feld withdrew Dean and Sloan's competing petition 2 weeks before it was scheduled, once it became clear the federal investigation into the payee filing wasn't going to resolve in their favor before the hearing date. Judge Castellano granted permanent guardianship without contest, and asked me at the end of the hearing, almost gently, whether Lily had settled into school yet. I told her yes. Kindergarten, a teacher named Mrs. Okafor who'd already learned that Lily liked to sit near the window. It felt strange, answering a question that small in a room that had decided something that large. My mother has called twice since the hearing. I haven't answered either time. I'm not interested in cruelty for its own sake. I don't think withholding forgiveness is the same thing as revenge. But I've learned over the last year that some doors get to stay closed on your own terms, for as long as you decide they should. Dean reached out once, separately from Sloan, a short, awkward text that read more like damage control than an apology. I didn't respond to that either. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I've stopped feeling obligated to perform forgiveness on anyone else's timeline. I heard, through Deborah, that the federal investigation into the payee filing eventually widened beyond Lily's case, that Sloan had a pattern investigators were still unpacking, older cases, other children, other families who trusted the wrong relative with a form. I don't know the full outcome. I know it stopped being something a family dinner could smooth over. Lily calls me Whitney most days, and Mom on the days she needs to, and I've stopped correcting her either way, because I think Vanessa would have wanted her to get to choose that for herself, the same way Vanessa chose her, the same way Vanessa chose me. I keep the letter in a drawer in my office, next to the DNA report and a photocopy of the guardian designation, not because I need the proof anymore, but because some documents are worth keeping even after the argument they settled is long over.